week ago, Anthony Albanese won an absolute landslide in the lower house. He decimated the Liberals. He won a majority Labor government. Not surprising. Not surprising. In fact, the day before, I warned you it was going to be a rough day. It was going to be a rough week. That is why we're going to see what happens in the Senate. So I've actually pulled up the statistics from the Senate. I've taken a week for the counting to happen, and it's not done. It'll still take another week or two. But I thought I'd give you guys a snapshot as to who are our senators that we're going to have for the next 6 years, because they get elected for 6-year terms. Many of our greatest freedom fighters from the last few elections have actually come from the Senate, which is why I really want to zoom in on what that is. And so the first part of this video, I'm going to explain to you, in short, what is a snapshot? Where are things at? Who are these senators? And how does that affect the balance of power? And then I'm going to get into the a bit more nerdy, Joel Jamal, these are the statistics. This is exactly why I'm saying that, and this is the numbers behind it. So I will be bringing up my Excel spreadsheet for that. But if you just want to know the snapshot of where it is right now, I'll give you another update next week as well. But this is where things are at. So essentially, in this election, it looks as though the freedom parties, the minor right parties, they are in the game in 4 states: New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, and WA. In Tasmania and in South Australia, it looks like the left-wing votes were just too big in order to get a senator up. Very much the Greens vote has surged in those states, and the Labor vote has surged, and the Liberal vote has collapsed, unfortunately. And very much what's happened is the Liberal Party needed votes from the minor parties to get their second senator, but we'll get into that later. In the other 4 states, in New South Wales, it's looking as though it's a battle between Labor and One Nation for the 6th seat. In Victoria, it's also between Labor and One Nation. In Queensland, it's between Malcolm Roberts leading and Gerard Rennick. And then in WA, it's between Labor and One Nation. Now, that is going to progress. I'm going to get into the numbers in a bit about exactly what that is and why it's still very much in the air. But specifically, I wanted to say, with regards to the balance of power, even if we get these 4 senators up, we will not have the balance of power, even if we get these 4 up. The reality of the situation is when you get senators up, they're in for 6 years. So we have senators that are still in the parliament from the 2022 election. They weren't up for election this time. And as you can see on this graphic right here, in 2022, the Labor Party and the Greens managed to get 3 or 4 senators up in every state. For example, they managed to get 4 up in WA. Labor got a 3rd senator up, which was Senator Payman in WA, back in 2022. And in Tasmania, they also got an extra left-winger up as well. 2 Labor, 1 Green, and Jackie Lambie. And that's the problem. What we needed to see in the last election was 2 Labor, 1 Green, 2 Liberal, and 1 Freedom Party, at least. Unfortunately, that's not what happened last election. Now, in this election, what is the snapshot? Well, across the country, it appears as though Labor have secured at least 2, Liberal have secured at least 2 in every state, and the Greens have secured at least 1 in every state. So they're up to 12 in total. And even if we get 4 freedom fighters, we are still short of the balance of power, unfortunately. Elections have consequences. The Liberals ran a very weak campaign, and the freedom parties are all split. So this is what we get for not getting our systems right and for actually working together rather than splitting the vote. So without further ado, I'm now going to get into the statistics of exactly state by state who is in the running, because if we get 4 senators up, it's very important to understand who gets up, because it'll influence how do we move forward from here as a movement. But specifically, in the last parliamentary term, with the way things that are trending right now, no matter how the Senate pans out, it's looking as though Labor will only need the Greens to get legislation passed in the Senate. So the Greens have a firm hold over the balance of power in the Senate. And the Liberals are the only other people that could pass legislation as well. So the only way a vote gets up for Labor this election is if the 12 Green senators vote for it or if the Liberals vote for it. Now, why does this matter? In the last parliamentary term, the last 3 years, Labor needed the Greens plus 2 other votes, either Jackie Lambie, David Pocock, Tammy Tyrrell, some of these independents on the crossbench, or a few Liberals that leave. Now they don't need any of those people, and that means there's less requirements for them to get a bill passed. They just have to go to the Greens. So in many ways, this made the Greens more powerful. This is why you haven't seen me celebrating that much that Bant is gone in the lower house. In the Senate, the Greens have secured the balance of power even stronger. And that could be a good thing, which I'll get into in a sec. But Labor can only pass bills either via the Greens or via Liberal. Now, why would I say that's a good thing? If the Greens do something stupid, and I hope they do this, if they block all of the bills from Labor because they're asking for too much or whatever, and if the Liberals aren't budging and helping Labor pass bills either, Anthony Albanese, and it's a slim chance that this happens, but it's a very good chance though, Anthony Albanese could call for a double dissolution election, which means the whole Senate is up for grabs. In a normal election, like what we just did in this election, the whole lower house goes up and only half the Senate goes up. But in a double dissolution election, the whole lower house goes up, as usual, but the whole Senate also goes up. That's why earlier on I mentioned that in 2022, these are the senators we're still stuck with from that election, from WA and Tasmania. So looking ahead, if Anthony Albanese calls double dissolution, you don't need 14% to get a senator. You only need 7. So it's basically 2 for 1. If you get 14% of the vote, then you might actually get 2 senators up. So at a minimum, the Freedom parties, who have a rough combined vote of 13 to 15% in every state, the Freedom parties would get about 1 senator per state, maybe 2. So across the country, that would mean we would get minimum 6 senators, up to about maybe 12 or 13 senators, which is insane to think about, but we would be equivalent to the Greens in the Senate. So we are very much hoping for that. We're hoping that the Greens frustrates Labor and Anthony Albanese dissolves the Parliament and calls for a double dissolution election, which won't take 3 years. It'll be a lot sooner than that. But if that doesn't happen, elections have consequences. We are stuck with a Labor-Greens de facto coalition for the next 3 years. Australians need to learn that the government under Labor, under the Greens, this is what they have in store for us. And unfortunately, that's going to drive the cost of everything up. So that's where things are basically at. I don't expect that to change, what I've just said, over the next 3 weeks to 4 weeks. That's the situation. So what I'm going to take you through now is very much the hard numbers of what's going on state by state. And I'm going to show you exactly how this Excel spreadsheet works and exactly where the number's at and why I'm saying that we are a potential in 4 states. So going into it, first things first, let's deal with the territories. In Canberra and the Australian Capital Territories, Senator Pocock has gotten up, and he used to be in the Teals, but he left the Teals, the Climate 200, and a Labor person got up. So the Liberals didn't manage to get enough votes in order to get up there. In the Northern Territory, Senator Jacinta Price got up for the Country Liberal Party. She's now just moved to the Liberal Party, so she's no longer in the Nationals. And Labor got one up. So those votes, they cancel each other out, essentially, in the Senate, if we're talking about the balance of power. Now we're going to get into the states. Those are the territories. Now we're going to get into the states. And the states are pretty much where it gets interesting. Forgive me if you get sick of the numbers, but this is what a lot of people are actually curious about. How do you know, Joel, that we're in the running for 4? And this is where we're going to get into it. So the most likely places where we get someone up is Queensland, then Victoria, then New South Wales, then WA, in that order. South Australia is then after that, and Tasmania is after that. Now, look, unfortunately, South Australia and Tasmania, at a very high level, it's looking very unlikely that we get someone up. The vote just has collapsed too much from the Liberals, and Greens and Labor have surged quite a bit in those states, unfortunately. And that means that a lot of the Freedom votes are flowing to Liberal to get them their second seat, rather than Liberal helping the Freedom parties to get their third seat. So going back into it, for New South Wales, let's start New South Wales. 77% of the vote has been counted. This is obviously today, the 9th of May, 2025. It's a battle between Labor and it's a battle between One Nation. Labor is currently on 66% of a seat, and One Nation is on 42% of a seat. However, if you calculate all the left-wing votes remaining and all the right-wing votes remaining, what you're left with is One Nation has 2% more votes than the left-wing votes, which is really good, because it means that if people followed the cards, the Turning Point Australia cards and other Freedom Party cards, that will flow to One Nation. Now, what's interesting is I did these numbers 2 days ago and then I updated them today. We are seeing a very serious trend in 5 of these states, towards the right wing. I think what's going on is the votes as we get closer to the end of the count are from election day, whereas the first votes that were counted were from pre-poll, early voting, postal votes. But it's very unclear how the Electoral Commission, what they count first. I'm sure they could tell us, but I haven't gone into it. So it's interesting because we're seeing it's kind of irrelevant why that's happening. But what's interesting is there is a trend, and it's happening in 5 of the states. So specifically, if you look at New South Wales, back when the vote was at 68.6% counted, the vote gap between One Nation and Labor was a lot larger. I mean, it was 7% lower. Now that the vote is up from 68% counted up to 70% counted by the Electoral Commission, it's trending up. Now One Nation is no longer 14% below, they're actually 2% above. And if that continues, that trend continues, that might help cover the inadequacies of preference flows and how we lose votes as the votes don't flow because people don't number their cards properly. So that's New South Wales. One Nation is very much in the running against Labor. No other party is in the running at this stage. And by the way, Warwick is a phenomenal candidate. He's been on this show. He's a former British SAS guy. I'm praying that Warwick gets up. I think he's a great candidate. For Victoria, we're seeing an even larger trend. This is a battle between Labor and One Nation. Labor is currently sitting on 44% of a seat, and we're seeing One Nation, which is currently sitting on 0.3 of a seat. And what's interesting is that there is actually a massive trend towards One Nation. If you add all of the left-wing votes up and you add all the remaining right-wing votes up, One Nation is now 3% ahead of the left-wing votes with all of those other votes underneath it. And the interesting thing is, I did the votes 2 days ago, back when the Victoria count was at 55% counted, and it was severely down. I mean, back when it was 55% counted, the Electoral Commission counted that amount of the ballots. One Nation was down by 16% of the votes. Now that we're on the 9th of May, 2 days later, they've almost counted 68% of the vote. One Nation is up by 3%. So we're seeing a larger trend up towards One Nation and the right wing as we're doing the counting, more than what we're seeing in New South Wales, which is huge. So it's trending in the right way for New South Wales. It's trending in the right way for Victoria. Let's move to Queensland, and I think this is probably one of the spiciest ones. Queensland is a battle between 2 freedom fighters, which is good. So it's not a question of is a left winger going to win, is Labor going to win. This is a battle between One Nation, Senator Malcolm Roberts, and Senator Gerard Rennick. So Malcolm Roberts is on 49% of a seat. Gerard Rennick is on 34% of the seat. The combined left-wing votes versus right-wing votes, there is 83% more votes for the left than for the right. Now, in terms of the amount of votes below the Malcolm Roberts and Gerard Rennick, there is 60% of a seat. So there's a lot of votes there that aren't for Gerard and they're not for Malcolm. However, if you look at how they preference, most of them preference Senator Gerard Rennick before Senator Malcolm Roberts. However, Malcolm Roberts did have the Liberal votes flow to him first before Senator Rennick. So this could be very interesting. anyone could take it the way that I see it right now. Anyone could take the vote. And it's interesting because it's very unpredictable. It was a 3-horse race early on between legalized cannabis and then those two freedom fighters, but now it's narrowed to Gerard Rennick or Malcolm Roberts. I don't know who takes this, but I think it's going to be a win if we see either one of them obviously get up. And so let's see what happens. It's trending in the right direction. We're seeing a situation where 2 days ago, their vote, there was 63% more than the left-wing votes. Now it's 83% more than the left-wing votes. So that's good. It's trending in the right direction. In WA, they've counted 65% of the vote. It's a battle between Labor. It's a battle between One Nation as well. Labor's on 56% of a seat. One Nation's on 40% of a seat. And if you add all the left-wing votes and you add all the right-wing votes, there's 1% more. So it's the tightest. It is the absolute tightest. So looking at where that was 2 days ago, that gap has closed a lot. In WA, the right-wing votes were down by 10%, but now that we're 2 days after that, it's narrowed to, so it's gone up to now 1% ahead rather than 10% behind. So that's really interesting. That's really interesting. So New South Wales, Victoria, WA, it's a battle between Labor and it's a battle between One Nation. However, in Queensland, it's a battle between Gerard Rennick or Malcolm Roberts. These are really tight races, very tight races. And I am hoping we get a freedom fighter up for all of them. So keep your toes crossed. Now let's look at the less likely ones, the least likely being South Australia first. It's a battle between Labor and it's a battle between One Nation. Labor is currently on 70% of a seat. They've almost got a seat. And One Nation is on 37% of a seat. Now, part of the problem in this state is the Liberal vote didn't get beyond 2 seats. They actually needed One Nation votes in order to get their second seat. So if you compare all the left-wing votes versus all the right-wing votes, there are 35% more votes for the left than there are for the right. So if I was to put money on it, I'd say Labor takes this, unfortunately, which is a big shame because Jennifer Game for One Nation running there is a phenomenal candidate, very knowledgeable, and her daughter's been serving very well in the state parliament, and Sarah Game. So, but the problem is the Liberal vote there, basically they needed help to get a second seat up in order to, so that's eaten into the Freedom Party's vote a bit. What's interesting about South Australia is 2 days ago, back when it was 70% of the vote counted, they had something like 46%, they were 46% behind. They were 46% behind. Now they are 35% ahead, and the vote count has gone up to 76%. So look, it's trending in the right direction. However, I don't think it's enough. I think if the left-wingers have a third of a seat ahead of you, it's not possible. Moving on to Tasmania, this is the most bleak of them. It's kind of a three-way battle. It's between Labor, Jackie Lambie, and One Nation. So Jackie Lambie's currently on 0.51 of a seat. One Nation, the Labor Party is on 49% of a seat, and One Nation is on 36% of the seat. One Nation is that's Pauline Hanson's daughter that's running for One Nation there. So looking at the total amount of votes, if you get all the left-wing votes and you add up all the right-wing votes, there are more Labor and left-wing votes and Jackie Lambie votes than there are right-wing votes. There's 76% more, to be specific. That's not good. And their vote is 80% counted. It's not likely to trend in a direction fast enough. So unfortunately, I think this one's pretty much home and hosed. There are only 2 coalition senators that are up in Victoria, and then probably 3 Labor, and then 1 Green, or 2 Labor, 1 Green, and Jackie Lambie. And that's the situation. So all in all, I'm going to do another video on this probably this time next week to tell you exactly where the numbers are at for the Senate. I mean, if people want it sooner, maybe I'll do it sooner, but there's really no point until we have the final numbers. And I'll update you on how this is going. I mean, it's hard to say how the preferences are going to flow. Even when the AEC does 100% of the votes counted, they still have to simulate how they end up flowing. We still have to take that into consideration. And so we don't yet know that. We're going to have to wait to see that. And so I'll keep you posted. So, look, the situation with the freedom movement, a lot of people have been saying, what do we do from here? We've got to wait for seeing who the senators are that get elected, because they form a part of the plan moving forward. And we also need to see what happens with the Liberal Party leadership. We've seen Matt Canavan is challenging David Littleproud for the national leadership. And we're also seeing in the Liberals that the Liberals are having a leadership spill because they lost Peter Dutton. He's no longer a member of Parliament. He lost his seat. So the coalition is in turmoil. The Freedom Parties are very much in turmoil. If they don't get any senators up, or they don't get many, or they get one from this party but not from that party, a lot is in flux. So we're going to have to wait to see how the data comes out. But we smashed it. We smashed it with regards to the resources we rolled out. We did over 400,000 how-to-vote cards for the Turning Point Australia cards. That makes up more than 2.5% of all voters, which is nuts. That's insane. And on top of that, we saw a situation where we've had a massive viewing on election night. When we finished the 9-hour stream, we got 500,000 views, which is nuts. That's crazy. That was more than the ABC on their YouTube and as well as Sky News on their YouTube combined. So we know we have a great movement. We know we have great people, but we have to get the mechanics of our political parties sorted, because we can win a referendum, but for some reason our political parties are so divided we can't win an election. And that's the real problem. And we can't have a leader like Peter Dutton from the major right-wing party that's flip-flopping on things. And we also can't have minor parties where there's like 9 of them running for the federal seat. And so that's the situation we have. There's going to be a lot of introspection for everyone, including myself, by the way, what we have to do moving forward. But with regards to these parties, they've got to... my phone's been melting down from the amount of people calling for some sort of change that we need in this country to move forward in a unified manner. And so I'll keep you updated with how things are going. Don't be afraid to tune out of politics for a bit. Don't let it dominate your life too much. At the end of the day, no one has more control over your life than you and your family. And you should always remember that, because it's not a government that will make you rich. It's not a government that will make you poor. It's specifically what's in your power, what can you do as an individual to actually build yourself up, protect your family, and look out for yourself. And that's the only way to move forward. We can't be paralyzed by fear and by what someone may or may not do in the government. And that's, I think, the main lesson we learnt out of COVID. However, Australia has not fallen. I believe that the best is still ahead. In fact, when the US lost their election in 2020, and I believe it was stolen, how did they pick themselves up from it? They picked themselves up by applying themselves, building themselves up, and recognizing that this is the divine providence they need to go to the next level. Look at Nigel Farage, the Brexit Party. They lost they won the 2016 Brexit vote, and yet they never left the European Union for 3 or 4 years after that. In fact, they were even betrayed by Boris Johnson. They had to start a whole new party, and look what they just did at local elections. They won over 650 council seats, a couple of mayors, they won the majority in 10 councils, and they won another federal MP. That's what they can do over there, but it took a lot of building, a lot of fundraising, a lot of building of their institutions and their actual mechanics to get electoral outcomes. That's what we have to do. We needed this shake-up, and the Australian people, if you guys have lost hope in the Australian people, wait till you see them in 3 years and they realise that Anthony Albanese has delivered nothing. I'm not saying the Liberals can turn it around in 3 years. However, it has happened before. We did see, for example, a situation where there was a massive majority won by John Howard in 2004, 2005, and by the time you get to 2007, all of that dissolved and Labor ended up coming in. This is the cycle of politics. This is what it is. However, we can make it more likely to be in our favour if we apply ourselves better. And that's why I'm not going anywhere. That's why I'm sticking with you guys, and we're going to keep building our following. Our how to vote cards have grown incredibly. In the last federal election, 2022, we did 250,000 how to vote card downloads, which made up about 1.5% of the electorate, 1.5% of the voters. That's nuts. Whereas in this election, we've done 400,000 and we've done well over 2.5% of the voters. The other thing we have to keep in mind is a lot of voters didn't turn out and vote. In fact, in the last federal election, it was an 89% participation rate, whereas now that's dropped to 77%. So it's gone from 11% not participating to 23% not participating. It's doubled. There is a large dispossessed bunch of people out there we have to go out and get the vote out for, just like the Yanks did, just like Charlie Kirk did, by going after low propensity voters, people that don't come out to all of the elections. And that's why Turning Point Australia is committed to fighting all elections. No organisation in the country has fought local, state and federal in the last few years as many as Turning Point Australia. We've done 9 elections on local, state and federal, and that is what we need in order to move forward. And if we look at what's happened around the country, like Cessnock, for example, they fought local elections, they won half of the council spots, and they won the popular vote for the mayor in Cessnock in New South Wales. So how did they go in the federal election? Well, they backed the One Nation candidate, and he didn't come third after the Nationals. He came second. He came second after Labor. And Labor is freaking out. They know that he is snipping at their heels. That level of grassroots movement targeting local, then state, then federal elections is exactly what we need in all 150 electorates, not just in the Hunter Valley. And that is the equation for success, which I'll be sharing more on in the coming months. And so don't give up hope. This is exactly what I wrote in the post the day before the election. I said, guys, it's going to be a rough night. It's going to be an elbow win. And we're going to have to see what's left. We're in a hostage situation. Who's been kidnapped? Who's been killed? What's the ransom? We have to take an inventory. But we will move forward, and it's going to be in a productive way. And that is exactly how the Yanks were successful. That's exactly how the Poms are being successful now. And that's exactly what we have to do. So embrace the pain, appreciate the pain, and understand that the best teacher is the pain. And then you'll realize that we are on path for a victory in the future. I'll see you guys later.